Welcome to All Things Financial with Jack Driscoll. Each week, Jack takes on all things you thought were hard to understand about your finances and makes it fun, easy, but most of all interesting. From insurance to the best way to save your money and squeeze the most out of the dollars you put aside for your rainy day. And now, you have a friend in the money business. Here's your host, Jack Driscoll.
Welcome back, everyone, to another edition of All Things Financial. Today, I have a special guest with me, a CPA and attorney, Tammy Singleton English. Tammy, I appreciate your coming on the show.
Glad to be here, Jack.
Tammy, why don't you tell the folks a little bit about yourself for starters, how they can get in contact with you if they have questions throughout the show?
Okay, my name is Tammy Singleton English. I have my own law firm. It's called Singleton English Law Offices. We are located in Bethel Park, right across from South Hills Village on Washington Road. The address is 1725 Washington Road. It's in the St. Clair building. Most people know that because there's a hair salon on the first floor. I have a phone number is 412-851-0529, and we have a website which is singletonenglishlaw.com.
Okay, appreciate that. What's the majority of what your practice does? Because you do two specialties, right?
Right. So I'm a CPA and a lawyer, and our law practice focuses on estate planning and probate work primarily, as well as a lot of income tax return work. So those are our two main focuses. We also do a little bit of small business work and real estate transactions.
Because that's interesting, because what I find is taxes and legal overlap a lot. Some of the decisions we make on taxes or investing overlap into, wait a minute, that might be wrong on the legal side.
Right.
Where you can, and with your skills, help kind of buffer those two, maybe sometimes conflicting areas, right?
Right. And that is how I got into this line of work, actually. After I went to college, I graduated with an accounting degree, so I worked as a CPA for a Big 8 accounting firm. And after a few years at a big accounting firm, I went back and went to law school. And then when I graduated from law school, I had the accounting degree as well as the law, and I wanted to be able to combine both of those. Mm-hmm. And so the estate planning and probate and tax work allows me to use both my legal experience as well as my accounting background.
Yeah, which positions you well for that.
Right. So, and I worked for two large accounting firms, both international accounting firms, and two large law firms before I started my own practice. So I had a good experience dealing with a variety of issues and having the background of working for a larger entity.
How long have you been in your own practice?
I've had my own practice for 20 years.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you. Does it fly by or seem
like
forever?
By. No, well, it depends.
Yeah.
It generally flies by.
That's good. What do you want to talk about today? What do you think we ought to do?
Well, I thought we should talk about why it's important to have an estate plan and why it's important to have a will and powers of attorney and have them reviewed frequently to make sure that they stay current and up to date.
Do you see many people without a will or estate plan?
Yes, there are quite a few people who don't have estate plans. There are famous people hear about all the time. Michael Jackson. I have a list of people here. Jimi Hendrix.
Really?
Bob Marley, Amy Winehouse, Sonny Bono, Howard Hughes, Barry White, Marvin Gaye. Lots of people, famous people and not famous people, that die without a will.
Without even a will?
Without even a will. And if you die without a will, then the state of Pennsylvania determines where your assets will be distributed and who gets them and how much they get. That's called intestacy.
Are each states, are they different?
They're different. State to state, they're different. And I don't know all the other states. I know the Pennsylvania intestacy laws, which it depends on who's living, who gets your assets, and how much they get. So, for instance, if somebody is married and doesn't have a will, and if they have parents, the surviving spouse and the surviving parents split the person's assets.
In Pennsylvania?
In Pennsylvania. It doesn't just go to your surviving spouse. And
Really?
if you have children, that also gets split. So it depends the number of people that are living, their relationship to you, and that's where sometimes people get into trouble because they think, well, if I don't have a will, the state will figure out where it goes. And they will, but it might not be what you want.
Yeah.
You know, and before we had same-sex marriages, that was an issue for some people that wanted their significant other to get some of their assets, and under intestacy laws, they would get nothing.
Yeah.
Or if you were living with somebody, even if you're engaged but you're not married, and there's a death before the actual wedding, the fiance would not receive any of the assets without having a will.
So without a will, you're depending on the laws of whatever state
Right.
you're domiciled in?
Correct.
What are you running into when you look at some of these extreme examples that you brought on celebrities or whatever? Why would they not have a will, number one, I guess, is the question. And what are some of the problems?
Well, as to why they don't have a will, sometimes people die at young ages. Like one of these people died at age 36. I think Bob Marley died at 36. And young people tend to think, oh, I'm young, I'm healthy, nothing's going to happen to me. But there are unexpected things. There are car accidents, there are sudden onsets of cancer or the Titanic, you know, anything can happen. So sometimes people don't have a will or any type of estate planning documents because they think they're too young. Some people think they don't have enough money, that they don't need it because they don't have enough assets because they think estate planning is only for rich people.
I see.
Some people think, oh, I don't have children. I don't need to worry about it because I don't need a guardian. So there are reasons why people, I think, mistakenly think that they don't need to have any estate planning done. As for these rich and famous people, you would think that they would get enough help and assistance from financial advisors and their people that they would be told to get these things taken care of, and they just don't. And with famous people particularly, having a trust is a very important part of their estate plan because it keeps things private, because trusts are not public record, but wills are. So anything that goes through your will, through the probate system, is subject to public scrutiny. Whereas if you set up a trust, that's a private document that does not have to be published anywhere. And a lot of these people that have millions of dollars and multiple families and whatever situation, they want the privacy. But if you don't take the time ahead of time to create a trust, the trust that's right for you and your situation, then it becomes a free-for-all and the media's all over it. And
almost like a freak show.
it is.
Because those estates,
It
as I
is.
read on some of those, they're
Right.
tied up for
Years.
decades.
Yeah, years and decades. And one of these that I had in my chart here, they spent $30 million in legal fees
Wow.
to administer
Just in legal fees?
in legal fees to administer the estate because they had so many people fighting over it.
Wow.
And one of them, Jimi Hendrix, I think, he had a surviving father, so his father claimed that he was the sole beneficiary. Well, there was a woman who claimed to be his illegitimate daughter, so she claimed to be the sole beneficiary. So they went at it for years and spent hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars in legal fees between the two of them, fighting it out over who was going to get it, if they were going to split it, if one person takes all. So there's a lot at risk for people, and even for average run-of-the-mill kind of people who aren't celebrities and don't have hundreds of millions of dollars.
Like the rest of us.
Like the rest of us, like you and me.
Right.
Wouldn't you want to make things easier for your family? The death in itself is hard enough. You don't want to put your family through all this extra difficulty dealing with legal issues that are unnecessary, family battles, fighting it out, worried about where the money's coming from, who's getting it. It just seems like the best thing that somebody can do for their family is to have everything planned out in advance.
Yeah, and like you're saying, I guess it's almost a certainty that whatever you have built up through your life is going to the wrong people in most cases without a will, if you don't put a roadmap down what you wanted done with it.
Right. And it's because most people think, oh, I'm married, I'll go to my spouse. But in Pennsylvania, for instance, if you have a spouse and children, The spouse gets the first $30,000. Then the spouse and the children equally split what's left.
Really?
And some people are fine with that, but some people don't want that. Some people want to make sure that their surviving spouse has access to everything, because you could be in a situation where if there's a split, the surviving spouse now doesn't have enough money to pay medical bills. If it's somebody that needs to be in a nursing home,
Right.
and half or three-fourths of the assets have been distributed to the children,
Yeah.
who are in their prime earning years, and they don't necessarily need the money, but then you've got the surviving spouse who can't afford sufficient health care coverage in his or her later years, and most people don't want that to happen,
Right.
but that's what could happen if you don't have a will and specify. Another issue is people with blended families or second marriages. We see a lot of issues with that because husband has children from his first marriage, wife has children from her first marriage. This is a second marriage. Sometimes they have joint children, sometimes they don't. Then if husband dies and he wants to provide for his children, but he also wants to provide for his wife, and
Right.
does he want to provide for her children? You know, there's a lot of issues related to that, and anything can be drafted. It's just a matter of taking the time to sit down with somebody, explain what you want. A lot of times people have to think about what they want, because once I start posing questions to people,
Yeah.
they haven't thought about that particular issue.
Let's talk about this. Somebody decides we're going to do a will, a couple, let's say, with children,
Right.
and they want to first determine what they want to happen, and it may be very simple for them.
Right.
Can they do it just on a napkin?
It is legally enforceable if it's on a napkin, if it has been executed in accordance with the requirements of the state of Pennsylvania. So you have to have a certain number of witnesses. The witnesses have to be of a certain age. They can't be related in certain methods. You really should have it executed in front of a notary. The notary is required because if somebody signs a will and if they have the correct witnesses, and then when that person dies, the witnesses have to go to the Register of Wills and swear in front of the Register of Wills that, yes, that's my signature. Yes, I was there at the time. Yes, I saw the testator sign this document. Now, that's how it had been for years and years and years, and maybe 20 years ago, the state legislature realized, well, this is a problem because people move out of state, you can't find these people, people die.
Yeah.
How do you get a dead witness to come to the Register of Wills? It's a problem. So if you have the will executed in front of a notary, now the notary is taking your attestation as to answer all those questions.
So you go into a notary and you say, could you please notarize this napkin?
So if you're going to do that, you might as well just go see a lawyer.
Yeah. Since it has to be done properly, everything
Right.
in the right order, that sounds scary to me.
Right,
If
right.
you're going to take the effort to
do it.
think about it, wanting to make things simple, don't make them more complicated by just trying to do it yourself to
Right.
save money where your whole estate's at risk.
Right.
No matter how small
Right.
or large your whole estate really means, it's important to you. It's important to everybody involved in your family and who you wanted it to go to.
And the other thing is, people oftentimes will ask me, well, can't I just go to Best Buy and get that will package that they have at the computer store and just fill out that will? And again, you can do that. However, think about this. The rules are different in every state. There are 50 states in the United States of America. That computer program was generated by some 23-year-old who lives in California. Do you really think that he took the time to research the requirements of all 50 states to make sure that you're going to sign a will that's going to be valid in the state where you live?
Yeah.
Maybe, but chances are probably not. And if your state happens to have the same execution requirements as California, where Silicon Valley, they maybe have come up with that, you might be okay. But are you really willing to take that chance to save a little bit of money?
Right.
And like you said, you're putting your estate and potentially your family relationships at stake by not just doing it the right way.
When someone comes to you, I think one of the advantages are most people sometimes don't recognize oh, I didn't think about that. I didn't think about this. So when they
Right.
come to you with their napkin
Right.
and say, here's what we would like drafted.
Right.
Here, we put it down.
Right.
Here are our wishes.
Right.
And you'll say, well, what do you want to happen if your son or daughter is under age 18? Who's the custodian or guardian? And they'll say, I didn't think about that. So to me,
Right.
one of the big advantages rather than buying an off-the-shelf software is to have someone guide on, oh, I didn't think about that, I didn't think about this, and get those provisions in there. It's very simple, I would imagine,
Right.
if you just talk for a half an hour.
Right.
So how does it work when they come to you? What's the process
Well,
like?
what I generally like to do with people is if people call for an appointment, we like to send a questionnaire to them in the mail ahead of time.
In lieu of a napkin.
Instead of the napkin. If you want to bring a napkin too, that's okay, but let's start with the questionnaire.
Okay.
So the questionnaire, first I collect basic information, name, street, address, ages, names of children, what have you. Then we have a section in there that talks about what types of assets you have, who owns them, because ownership is very important. And by ownership, I mean whether it's husband, wife, or joint.
Okay.
And the approximate values of the various types of assets. I don't need it down to the penny because it's going to change anyway, but just to give us a starting point and a ballpark of where we are today and how much money we're talking about. Then the questionnaire goes through a series of questions of things that I ask people, like what you're talking about. Who do you want to receive your jewelry? Who, if you have heirloom items from your family, do you have any specific wishes about those? Do you want to make anatomical gifts? Do you want to do organ donation? Do you have any specific requirements about your home? Is it supposed to be sold? Is the surviving spouse supposed to live there? What if one of the children wants to buy the house? You know, who's the guardian? Who's the executor? Who's the trustee if you have a trust? So we go through a lot of questions.
Okay.
And it's important for people to fill that out at home because then the husband and the wife can kind of hash it out at home. I've had instances where a husband and a wife are in front of me at my conference table in my office and I say, who do you want as the guardian of your children? Well, I hate your sister and I hate your parents and I don't want it to be that person and well, I don't want it to be that person. And so they're going through this whole family feud kind of thing in front of me, and I think it's better for people to do that at home and they can talk it through and they can think about it. And because the guardianship oftentimes is one of the hardest questions for people, and I get a lot of people who say, well, no one's perfect, no one's going to be as great of a parent as I am, which is probably true. However, if you die with minor children and you haven't named a guardian, the court will appoint someone for you. And the court will essentially interview all interested parties. So interested parties are all relatives and creditors of the deceased parents.
Yikes.
So all of those people are interviewed by the court, and the court chooses one to serve as the guardian of your child.
Wow.
So I tell people, would you rather not pick somebody that you're maybe 80% happy with instead of having the court choose somebody who would be the last person on the face of this earth that you would want to have raising your children?
That's a huge
It's
point.
huge.
I did not know that.
No, it's huge, and people don't think that through, you know, and sometimes they think, oh, it'll be my parents or his parents or her parents or my parents. But it also could be your sibling, it could be, you know, a niece or a nephew or a grandparent or whatever. And like I said, the thing that shocks people is that creditors have actually the right to petition to be considered for that position.
Tammy, let me ask you next. A lot of people say, I already have a will.
Right.
So you're saying all the problems with not having a will, but they're fine because they have a will maybe 20 years ago or when they first got married or on their first child or whoever. What happens there? What's the situation with that?
Well, it's good that people have a will, but what we as estate planners like is we like to have people review their will every 3 to 5 years. That doesn't necessarily mean you need a new will, but the person whose will it is should look at it and take a look and see, well, have there been any major life changes since the last will? Because if somebody got married or divorced or had a child or there was a death in the family, a lot of times that will change the dynamics of your family, which means that your will should be updated to account for that. There's also the fact that your asset could have changed tremendously. If you have a will when you're just starting out and then you've worked for 20 or 30 years, your assets have grown, and now maybe what you initially thought was appropriate is no longer appropriate. And there's always the possibility that the tax law has changed. So I have seen many times people who come into my office and they bring their old will, and it's on that thin onion skin paper that you can't even find anymore. And they've had the will for 20 or 30 years, and sometimes there are people named in there that are deceased, because if somebody is 23 years old and they write their first will, well, they don't have children, so they would be naming their parents as the guardian for their children, or their parents as the executor under the will. Well, now, 40, 50 years later, their parents are no longer living, and if they are living, they don't have the mental capacity required to be able to serve in those capacities. So we get that a lot, where the person that's named is either no longer living or cannot function as that fiduciary.
Okay.
A lot of times people have come into my office and they've said, oh, we've been meaning to come in here for a long time. Our children are now 18. Well, okay, the first 18 years it would have been helpful to have a will when you had children and you didn't have a guardian named, but you know, things happen and circumstances change, so it's important to take a look at them.
Yeah, I've actually seen cases too, I'm sure you do, where somebody's parent is the beneficiary on the will.
Right.
And they're in a nursing home, so you've really made the nursing home maybe the beneficiary of the will if they're on Medicaid or whatever.
Right. And that's a whole completely related area of law, gets into the elder law and planning for Medicaid purposes, because if the person who's in a nursing home has too many assets or has right to assets or right to income, it will reduce their government benefits. So that's all part of estate planning and elder law work that sometimes people need assistance with that as well.
So when someone comes in and sees you and says, I want a will, I know I need a will, and you see some of those, or they know they have maybe a little more complex situation than just what's identified as a simple will, what's the next step for some people, or what's an alternative?
Right. Well, one thing that I do oftentimes with people is, if somebody has young children, I don't recommend just a simple will. I like people that have young children to have what we call a testamentary trust, because it's a will and a trust combined, so that if the parents die when the children are still young, under the age of 18 is the age of majority in Pennsylvania, that then you create a trust and you have a framework where you have already designated the trustee who's going to manage the assets for the benefit of the minor children. You've got a guardian already assigned, and you've got some restrictions and some guidance built in there for the children, and then once the children reach certain ages, then you can distribute the assets outright to the children.
I see.
And beyond that, the next level of complexity is for people who either have very complicated family relationships and you have to treat different people differently, or people that have a lot of wealth and you get into tax planning. And so if you have tax planning issues, then we use trusts significantly. We use revocable living trusts. Sometimes we use irrevocable life insurance trusts. There can be charitable trusts. There's a lot of different types of trusts that we can use to accomplish the client's objectives with respect to who in their family gets these assets, when do they get the assets, how much does everybody get, and also minimizing any kind of potential tax liability.
Okay.
So we get into those extra kind of services and documents that help to provide for the extra complexity of, if you have a grandparent who's trying to provide for the grandchildren, and one child is a special needs child where they are going to have different medical concerns, you've got those types of issues that can be dealt with trusts. People who have large levels of wealth pay Pennsylvania inheritance tax as well as federal estate taxes, and the federal estate taxes can be quite high, and you can do some tax planning with using various trusts, so that gets to be a useful method for people. People that have life insurance policies, we can sometimes wrap that up into a trust document.
Okay.
So there's a lot of options for different people with different levels of complexity in their lives or various wealth levels.
Yeah. Well, folks, we're just about out of time. Tammy, can you share once again how people can get a hold of you and what's best way?
Sure. Again, my phone number at my office is 412-851-0529, and we have an email account at www.singletonenglishlaw.com. Or if you would like to come in person, our office is in the St. Clair building, which is on Washington Road, right near South Hills Village.
Okay, that's perfect. So if they go on that website, they can click on there and get either email or whatever
Yes.
and contact you that way, or phone.
Right.
Okay, folks, thanks again for tuning in. Tammy, I appreciate you
Great.
being here this
Nice
week.
talking to you, Jack.
And we'll be back again next week.
Securities and investment advisory services offered through SagePoint Financial Inc., member FINRA SIPC, and registered investment advisor. Insurance services offered through Driscoll Insurance and Financial Services Inc., which is not affiliated with SagePoint Financial Inc.